Muy buenos días, 8:05 de la mañana en Centroamérica, 9 de la mañana en Ciudad de México y Panamá y 10 de la
Good
mañana.
morning, everyone. So it's 10 o'clock Washington, and 9 o'clock Panama, and 8 o'clock Costa Rican time and Mexico time. So today is Thursday, May 20th. Welcome to the Regional Conference on Migration. My name is Luis Alonso Serrano. I'm the Executive Secretary of the RCM. Today in the morning, we have a social dialogue for the implementation of labor rights policies for migrant women in paid domestic work. So let me remind everyone that this session has simultaneous interpretation available. We also remind everyone that according to the policies of the RCM on the adequate use of information, publications, and social media network management, we prohibit any reproduction of this content partially or fully live or referred in any media. So this is property of the member states of the Regional Conference on Migration, and all requests for reproduction must be channeled through the RCM Executive Secretariat. So this session will be recorded for the report that we will sharing with the pro temporary chair and the organizations that actually are cooperating with us. So welcome again. Welcome. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being with us in the social dialogue for the implementation of labor policies for migrant women in paid domestic work. So this activity is actually scheduled within the framework of on labor migration from the Regional Conference on Migration, of course. Now, I actually want to welcome all the delegations from the RCM member states, the organizations of workers and employees that actually accompany us, organizations from civil society, and also all the observing organizations. So I also remind you that this dialogue rather, is a fourth event of the action plan of labor migration from this year in 2021. And it has the purpose of promoting the dialogue and the cooperation of country of origin and destination in the design of labor policies that cover the labor needs and protect the rights of domestic workers and their care. To address these issues, we've actually invited panel members from different countries that will actually present their experiences on which we can actually build a dialogue among everyone here present. Now, before we start with our presentations, let me remind everyone that if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone to prevent or avoid any interruption. And also, we have simultaneous interpretation available. I welcome everyone who is with us to actually start off this webinar. And first off, it's my pleasure to actually greet Dr. Narina Gasman. She's the head of the National Institute of Women from Mexico. On behalf of the Pro Temporary Presidency of the RCM, welcome. So, welcome, Dr. Gasman. You have the floor. Good morning. It's a pleasure to actually be with all of you today. I I truly want to thank the opportunity of actually being with you in this very important social dialogue, and I do want to greet everyone. I also want to say that as president of the National Institute of Women in Mexico, it's a privilege to be in this ceremony, opening ceremony, from this social dialogue for the implementation of labor right implementation of migrant women in domestic work, in paid domestic work. I welcome and greet Luis Alonso Serrano, of course, Executive Secretariat of RCM, Noche Decan, a specialist on labor migration and mobility from ILO, and Micaela Machiavello, specialist on regional on migration. Machiavello, I'm sorry, specialist in development from the organization from IOM that actually accompanies us in this very important space. And I also want to greet the authorities and civil regional organizations and national organizations that actually will participate throughout this dialogue, with main goal is to promote the cooperation among countries of origin and destination on migration in the design of labor migration policies that respond to the needs of the labor market and to protect the rights of domestic workers. Now, at the worldwide level, we estimate that 164 million people are actually migrant workers, an increase of almost 10% since 2013, when the number was 150 million. Now, according to the ILO, the majority of migrant workers actually concentrated in the sectors of the economy with high temporary work, informal work, or unprotected work, characterized by low salaries and for a lack of social protection as domestic work and care. Now, the domestic workers are one of the most excluded workers in Mexico and in other countries. The discrimination that they actually confront is multiple, because besides that the great majority are actually women, they face obstacles due to labor policies that puts them in disadvantage compared to other workers. And in a case of migrant women, for example, they also have barriers related to migration regulation.
Obstáculos agravados por los
All these obstacles aggravated by the pandemic are actually exposed to greater risk and the possibility of actually working in conditions of informality, precarious conditions, and without access to other basic rights such as health, housing, and education. In Mexico, for example, many of these are actually in the southwest of the country as a result of an increase of migration coming from Central America. An important study carried out by the Women and the Institute for Women in Migration reported that at least there's three types of domestic workers: women domestic workers, migrant workers, in other words, born in Central America, that actually reside and actually work in Chiapas, were the transborder migrants that actually cross the border to actually cross the border into Chiapas and work for 24 hours and go back, and then temporary workers that actually cross the border to actually work for higher. What is the reality that these women actually face? One is the majority actually work irregularly, the lack of labor resources, the documents that actually accredits their legal stay in the country. They also employ themselves in the informality and precarious work with very low wages and low qualifications in sectors considered that are socially, quote unquote, as feminine work, like domestic workers and uh, the care of people for children or disabled people, ill people, or sick people, or senior citizens.
desconocen
In
los
general, the study actually says that they don't know about the rights and the mechanisms to actually comply and to enforce or to comply with the development of the region is not recognized, and they experience a multiple discrimination factor based on their ethnicity or racial discrimination or the economic situation, their nationalities, their age, their migration status, their sexual orientation, and gender identity. In the context of the pandemic of COVID-19, these women have seen severely affected either by a reduction in their salaries or remunerated paid work hours, or because they lost their job. But if they actually keep their jobs, the home chores and the attention actually increased, as well as the risk of actually exposing themselves to the risk without necessarily um, receiving a higher salary. And of course, even though the contribution standard that the work she actually means for the life of people of the Center for the Sustainability of a Human Life and for the operation of the household, the economy, and together with society, this has not been recognized sufficiently in the laws and in the concrete policies. The government of Mexico, the government of Mexico, we're actually aware of these realities, and that's why we actually reaffirm our commitment of promoting the decency and women and the rights of migrant women in the several stages of the migration cycle, and recognize the different human rights independently or differently of their migration status. And from the National Institute of Women
presidir,
that
ese
I actually have the
compromiso
honor of
con los
presiding. This
derechos
commitment is
humanos
actually
y con la
translated in
igualdad.
concrete actions of several
En
types.
materia migratoria,
On
nuestra
matters of
hoja de
migration,
ruta
our
incluye
roadmap,
en materia de
a
igualdad,
roadmap on matters of
igualdad, derechos
equality and pro
civiles iguales,
equality in
que
2024
consideramos
that
escuchando
we actually
a más de
build
4.000
listening to
mujeres de
over
todo el país,
4,000 women from
incluyendo
throughout the country,
trabajadoras del hogar y
including
mujeres
domestic
migrantes,
workers and migrant
cuentan con
women.
6
They
acciones
have six
puntuales que sin
specific
duda
actions that, without a
contribuirán
doubt, will
al
contribute
empoderamiento de las
towards
mujeres
the
y entre
empowerment
los
of
objetivos
migrant
de las que
women
se
workers.
encuentran
Among
el
them,
acceso a las
they have
mejores
the access
servicios
to of migrant women
educativos,
towards
la
health
difusión de
services,
imágenes
the dissemination
positivas
of
sobre ellas
positive
en los
images
medios de
for them or
comunicación
on them in the
alternativos,
public communication, private communication, and
para
digital
promover una
communication
cultura
to
libre de
promote a culture
discriminación,
free of
al
discrimination,
acompañamiento legal
to the legal
especializado
accompaniment,
a
specialized legal
mujeres
accompaniment
migrantes
of
víctimas de
migrant women
violencia y
victims of
trata, que
violence
acuden a
and trafficking
denunciar,
that
incluyendo el
actually complain
reconocimiento
and
a
actually
la
report
protección, entre otros.
uh,
Como
the
participantes
issues
en la Conferencia
that
Regional de
that occur
Migración,
among
el
them.
Mujeres
And also
Mexicanas
from
del
the
Instituto
e-Mujeres and the
Mexicano
Institute of Women,
para
we
la
actually followed a
Investigación General de
specific
Mujeres, la CEDAW,
general
para la
recommendations from the
Convención
CEDAW,
Internacional
from
de
the
los
International
Derechos
Convention
Civiles
of the
sobre los
United
Derechos
Nations
de todos
on
los
the
trabajadores
rights of
migrantes
all
y
migrant workers
refugiados,
and their
así
family
como la
members, as
ratificación de
well
los
as the
acuerdos y
ratification
convenios de
of the
la OIT
199
sobre
ratification of
los
the
derechos
ILO
de los
on
trabajadores
workers,
domésticos
domestic
que México
workers, that
ratificó en
Mexico actually
febrero del
ratified in
2020
July of
y en
2020,
conjunto con otras
and that
instancias
together with other
garantizan
instances or
su
agencies were
de su
actually
cumplimiento.
ensure its compliance.
En los próximos meses,
In the following months, the
las
e-Mujeres
autoridades de
will conclude a
investigación
process of
en algunos
investigation
municipios de
in a
Chiapas
few
para
municipalities of
identificar
Chiapas to
el
actually
impacto de la
identify the
pandemia
impact of the
en mujeres y
pandemic
niñas
in
migrantes.
migrant women
Además,
and girls.
impulsaremos un
And also,
modelo
we
de
will foster a
contención
model of psychological
dirigido a este
containment
grupo de mujeres
directed
que haya
towards
sido
this group of
replicado
women that
en
can be
otras entidades
replicated in
federales.
other federal agencies.
Finalmente,
And
desde el
finally,
instituto,
from my
estamos
institution,
impulsando
we're actually
la
fostering or
creación de un
promoting the
sistema
creation
nacional de
of a
cuidado
national system
que
of attention or
redistribuya los
care that
esfuerzos labores
redistributes
entre los
the
mercados
burden
del Estado
of
y
this
que
between the markets
reconoce
and
el
the states,
derecho
that
a la vida,
recognizes
a ser
the right to
cuidados
take care
y
and to be taken
garantice
care
los
of,
derechos de
and to
los
ensure the
millones de
rights of
mujeres
the
en
millions of women
México,
that
ya
actually take
sea
care of
por
people here in
o sin
Mexico,
remuneración.
either paid
Y
or
antes de
not.
concluir, quiero
And before I
recordar
conclude
que la
with my
pandemia
remarks, I
del
want to remind
COVID-19
everyone that the
ha
COVID-19
afectado
pandemic
más a las
has
mujeres y a
affected
las
more
niñas,
women and
especialmente
girls,
las que viven en
especially
contextos
those
de
who actually
mayor
live in
discriminación y
context of
violencia.
greater
Es
discrimination
en
and
este
violence.
contexto
And it's
donde
within this
también
context
tenemos la
that
oportunidad
we
de
also have the
trabajar
opportunity of
para que
actually
la
working
recuperación
so that the
cuente con
recovery
políticas
could
y
have
leyes
policies and laws,
interseccionales
intersectoral
justas y
laws, and that
inclusivas,
are just
así
and
como
inclusive,
medidas que
as well
garanticen
as
la protección
measures
de los
that
derechos de las mujeres
ensure the rights
trabajadoras
of
migrantes.
migrant workers,
Nuestras
female migrant
acciones
workers. Our
pueden cambiar la
actions can
vida de
actually
millones
change
de
the life
mujeres,
of millions of
pues
women,
cuando las mujeres
because
migran a
when
otros
women actually
países, lo que
migrate
se
to
hace
other
cargo
countries,
del cuidado
they
del
actually are
tercero
responsible
deja
of
de
third
existir en la
persons.
mayoría de
They
las
actually leave in
ocasiones.
the majority of
Somos el
cases. They
siguiente
leave
millón
people, their
migrante que ha
dependents, that
asumido a
their
sus
care
hijos
is actually
por otros
assumed
contextos,
by other women as well.
generalmente las abuelas, las
Generally,
tías,
the
las hermanas,
grandmothers, the
un
aunts, and the
escenario en el
sisters
cual
in a
los hombres
regular
no
situation
reconocen
where
la
men do not
responsabilidad del
assume
cuidado
this
de la
responsibility
mujer
of taking
y se
care when the woman
permiten
is
así
absent,
las
generating
denominadas
therefore
cadenas
what we
globales de
called
cuidado.
global care,
Desde el
chains of
Inglés
care. From
seguimos
e
trabajando
mujeres, we actually
con
continue
acciones
working
concretas
with concrete
para que el
actions
fenómeno
so that
migratorio
this
en el
migration
país siga
phenomena
siendo
in
una
the country can
prioridad en la
continue to
agenda
be a priority
institucional
in the
del Estado
institutional agenda
mexicano.
from the Mexican
De manera
states.
particular,
And
seguiremos
specifically, we will
visibilizando
continue to
cómo este
visualizing
problema
exactly
también
how this
atraviesa
issue
migraciones de
actually
género
goes
y
through the relations
conflictos de
of gender
género
and the direct
en
effect
quienes migran.
in which
Les
those who
deseo
actually
el
migrate.
mayor de
I
los
wish you
éxitos en
the
este
best of success
importante
in this very
diálogo.
important social dialogue.
Muchísimas gracias,
Thank you so
doctora
much,
Nadine
Dr.
Gaitán,
Nadine
de las
Gassman,
mujeres y los
head
laboratorios
of the Women's
domésticos.
Institute of Mexico, on behalf of
Este
the RCM. Thank you so much.
evento se realiza con el apoyo de la Organización
So this
Internacional del
event is done
Trabajo
with the support of the
y del Banco
ILO
Nacional
and
de
also
Desarrollo.
the
Este es el
IOM.
segundo
So this is
conversatorio
the
que
second
se hace sobre este
conversation
tema.
session that we
En
have
esta
on
ocasión
this
con la
issue, on this topic.
representación
So
de
I also want to
de
welcome
la
the
OIT,
specialists
la
from the
Organización de
ILO,
Trabajo Interno.
Northern Detection. Thank you so
Buenos días,
much.
Nord. Adelante.
Good morning, Nord. Thank you so much, Luis Alonso, and I do apologize for my very complicated first name and last name. Good morning, everyone, especially the Dr. Gassman. Thank you so much for your very kind and complete words. Also, my very dear colleague from IOM, and also, of course, all the participants and also the contemporary um, presidency that we actually prepared this very important event. I also want to especially greet obviously all the participants that also include representatives of workers and employers. So because this is an issue that is of quite of interest for all the different stakeholders that are quite important. Now, as I mentioned, I think Dr. Gassman already gave a whole complete perspective on the situation of female domestic workers in the world and in the region and how they're actually affected by the pandemic. That I feel that it's something that we cannot we have to mention besides all the different challenges that were presented and that we also see later on in other presentations that we actually have of experts in this topic. I also wanted to highlight that all the numbers that were mentioned in it's important that you know that in Latin America and the Caribbean we have 18 or 11 to 18 million domestic workers and 93% of these are actually women. And as he mentioned, there's a great part of them actually work in the informality. As a matter of fact, the majority of Central American actually works under these conditions. Now, I also wanted to indicate that in this context about the importance of the agreement of 2011 that we consider that it actually gives a before and after of the protection of domestic workers, and this actually allows the same rights that any person might have, and also opens the doors for this part of the title of this social dialogue of actually give a voice to the employers and also the workers, domestic workers, paid domestic workers. And this actually includes also possibilities of collective negotiation, of centralizing the whole some rights of revindication of very important rights, which you know that there's a lot of challenges, which you mentioned a lot of these in the presentation of Dr. Gazdam. And once again, it's important to emphasize that many of these conditions, challenging conditions that they actually face are actually severed by the COVID pandemic, and that we're actually this we're talking about how can we actually provide a better response to this situation. And that's why we're actually very happy that this action plan from the labor migration, the countries has defined that this is one of the issues that we need to actually address. So so I don't want to extend myself too much because we have many different experts in line that are going to speak about this issue. I do want to thank everyone from all the different agencies, Luis Alonso, the executive secretariat of RCM, everyone that are actually comprise the contemporary presidency, the colleagues from my WEM. In coordination of this event, and also we expect that this is of great interest and we can actually interact and talk more in these
Muchas
following
gracias a
hours.
ustedes, ¿no?
Thank you
Gracias
so
a
much, Nord. Thank you, ILO. This is
placer mucho
work that we do in a
estar
team. And I also want to welcome Micaela
un
Machiavello
saludo principalmente en
uh,
nombre del
for
Organismo
her opening
Internacional para las
remarks
Migraciones.
on
Muchas gracias.
behalf of the IOM. Micaela, you have the floor. Good morning. I do want to thank and greet, first off, the Prontary representative from the RCM, clearly Dr. Nadine Gassman, Iperman, and my very dear colleague, Nord's, that she's a specialist from ILO. Let me go ahead and give just some brief words. I like we very important things were already mentioned by Dr. Gassman, and she indicated all these different challenges that these workers are actually facing right now. So just to remind everyone that as we actually mentioned in the conceptual note, and we as we also see in the different press articles and other documents, we know for certain that at the worldwide level, but especially in this region, the majority of these female workers are actually migrant women. We also know that this work has a very low consideration in the unskilled, unqualified, or semi-qualified work, and this is actually translated usually into a reduced level of protection of labor rights, and this sector is actually overburdened for abuse and exploitation that and also includes sexual abuse. Due to its nature, this work is a private type of work that it happens within the walls of the household, where no one from the outside can actually see, or they can offer help, but at the same time where almost all the workers, they don't leave the walls of the household during this period of pandemic. I also want to highlight that globally, but also especially in the countries of high income, especially in this region, this is this is something that unfortunately is considered not just of low quality, but it's almost as a servant, in which the workforce does not want to offer their work, their service, because they want to work in something else, and effectively, because since this is done mainly by females, it's a sector that unfortunately it's almost totally informal. The consumption note, it says it or states it very clearly. Now, with this said, how have we seen this? We've seen this through our work of assistance to victims of abuse, violence, exploitation, and trafficking, but also through our support that we actually will see the countries of this region, especially in the development of the labor strategy of development. The majority of migrant workers are actually in this informal work.
Es decir, a través de contacto personales, ¿no? Y es esto también que
It's
permite a
done
uno
through personal contact, and the families are they don't feel the issue of observing the national rules, especially to actually put in order the domestic rules, avoiding ensure minimum salary, social security, vacations, this, and also a schedule that respects the maximum amount of hours worked per day. A final note, very briefly, but I think it's very important, is that all of us that are actually in this event, and if we can actually share a few words, we ask ourselves the following: how many of us that are actually participating over here has a domestic worker? It might be an assistant or an aide that helps someone who's sick, or and how many of us have taken the action of paying all the different labor benefits to our domestic workers? So, in other words, I'm not talking about exception. I'm talking about everyone, giving everything without exception, or quite the contrary. How many of us are actually considering several excuses? For example, there's, well, I can't allow that, or this woman, she's, she's lucky to have this job. Don't bug me with other things, but this is not my responsibility. And we can add so many other things and a million other excuses. With that said, we actually know that yes, this is our responsibility. We need to start to understand that these are rights that cannot be forgotten, and effectively we are all responsible for this, and that example must come from us. We need to consider that we're in time to actually start with this, and it's never late. And to respect the labor rights of workers, of domestic workers, female domestic workers, helps tremendously in the government system, to so that the regularity of the work is the norm and not the exception. So with these words, maybe um, uh, Hopefully, we wish ourselves a good day and an excellent participation in today's session. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Michaela, and thank you so much for Y Mujeres from Mexico, Dr. Gasman, and ILO, and Nord, and IOM, Michaela. Thank you. Now, so we can go get right into it. I just want to mention that this event has two blocks. The first one will be comprised by presentations, where we actually selected three main stakeholders that actually are here with us. First off is the organized domestic workers organization, and also the organized employers, and also an organization of paid migrant domestic workers. And we also want to that during the presentation you can reflect on how to improve the rights of the domestic workers, and what type of proposal mechanisms can actually accrue for the uh, for the paid work represented by the different countries over here, as well as the identification of the different means that actually make this possible in the region, and recognize the different competences that the domestic workers, paid domestic workers actually have, and the strengthening of employment through training programs. In the second block, we will have a conversatorium from different panel members that have been developed in different countries, in which all of us we can actually provide our input. So I don't want to, as we advance in the webinar, our moderators will actually be accompanying us and guiding us in the different work to be seen, and we'll do an exercise of on monitoring, so that this event is not just for today, but we can actually have a development afterwards in a framework on labor migration. In order to use our time efficiently, I pass the floor to ILO, who will moderate the following block. So thank you so much, and we once again thank for your attention. ILO, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Luis Alonso. Good morning, everyone. Frida Vasquez from ILO. And in order to actually start the second block, I actually want to actually welcome all the different panel members that will actually be with us. We had the presence of Carmen Brites, president of the Federation of Home Domestic Workers, Claudia Saucedo from Hogar Justo Hogar from Mexico, and also Natividad Obeso from the Association of Migrant Workers and Refugee Women in Argentina. So all the words that were said in this context, and what we intend to see in this first blocking conversation, is to deepen a bit more on the challenges that we see in the advance of domestic workers in the region, but especially to analyze what have been the main advances and success that we had in different matters. So without further ado, please allow me to pass the word to Carmen Brites, president of the International Domestic Workers Association, that that this International Federation of Home of Domestic Workers and the network of international female workers had a key participation in the agreement of 189 of ILO, and she's had a key role in the ratification of this agreement in the region. So thank you so much, Carmen, and welcome. I pass the floor to you. Good morning. And I do apologize that I have to be with my mask, but I just came out. I just came out of COVID, and I need to take care of myself quite a bit, because it's my health has been affected by this COVID, and so I have to wear a mask. So I had a presentation, um, and maybe we can actually present it, please, or if you can actually give me the chance to actually pass those slides. 'Cause we have many different slides, so we can. Can everyone hear me?
Sí, le escuchamos. Ya, en breve le estaremos dando la autorización.
Just give me 1 second, and we'll pass it. Well, first off, I want to greet everyone, everyone that actually were before me, and those who will come afterwards. And I believe that you've actually given a very real perspective of what's going on, and what and the issues that the domestic workers actually have in this context. And this mainly, I think that the migrant workers, female migrant workers, for us, it's very important from the federation to the support that we actually give to each of our members in the region. At this moment, we have about 24 members from Latin America and the Caribbean within our federation, and we've actually done or had a context within this pandemic of a very important survey where we actually verified the situation that the domestic workers actually had. This pandemic was has two main axes. One, no, you can share your screen directly if you want. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You can share your screen directly if you want. Yes, because it says that I can't share my screen. I don't know what's going on, but it says that I'm not authorized to share my screen. Well, I'll continue so we won't take too much time. So like, as was said before, we're just seeing that within Latin America and the Caribbean, we have 18 million domestic workers or domestic workers, as the 189 agreement from ILO says this. And within these 18 million, 93% are actually female workers in our region, in Latin America, and around the world. The particular home care or domestic work is completely is wholly women, female. There's about 98% actually are actually women. So, from the visualization of this survey, what we actually saw is the issue that this actually increased within the particular home situation, not the firings that we saw in domestic workers and how carried out by this or caused by this pandemic. And this is the most hard hit work because their salaries were lowered and they were fired, and also they unqualified person and qualified as a non-essential, and in many different spaces they see qualified as essential, but they didn't provide anything, they didn't provide any no safety whatsoever within the work point of view. So, and also we as a federation, what we actually we actually guided directed the situation so that the workers from domestic workers can actually have a vision which is broader in the regards to the protocols through proper training. The issue is that the suffering, uh, and as said, everything with the firings, the majority are actually heads of households, and that's why it's very important. And and with the pandemic, actually majority actually lost their work, or they've actually been infected of COVID. So the first death of COVID was in Latin America, in the Caribbean, was a Brazilian colleague, 63 years old, that her employer actually infected her. So this should have the vision that the employer should not infect the workers. So when they go to a house and they actually infected the person. Let me see if I can share my screen once again. And yeah, you can have access as a host. Yeah, I'm not seeing this.
Estamos viendo su pantalla, pero solo vemos.
Yeah, we see your screen, but we only see your Zoom screen.
Sí, 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 nosotros lo estamos ya proyectando también.
Yeah, evidently, I can't do this on my end.
Sí, nosotros lo proyectamos y usted nos va diciendo.
So you tell us exactly. So you can actually if you could just share it, then okay, I'll continue. Otherwise the time will pass by. So the risk of health and health and we see the differences. The 59% in Guatemala, 51% in Brazil, 71% in El Salvador, 74% in Colombia that did not receive no personal protection equipment. It's important to actually know about the percentages for us. Also, we actually knew that the uh, within the transportation, 50% they actually travel over 1 hour to actually reach their job. So the response of the unions to actually face this economic crisis and social crisis is to actually monitor the communication of helping our members through particular issues that they actually suffered in firings and of illness, of course, the collection of funds of different online platforms that actually managed to actually have a, a humanitarian aid to help them to actually receive from the federation from is to actually provide each and of their members or leaders to provide food and um, any legal assistance and other rights of the workers and help. And there's great help. And so I could do different campaigns in the situations, but not just at the societal level, but also at the state level. And there's a campaign of stay at home and stay who taking care of you throughout the region. And it- and also the quarantine and the inclusion of employment protection and also social protection measures. And that's why they actually need public spaces, social networks. They should use all the different media outlets to actually visualize and the representation of the issue that they're actually seeing in the public powers. Then the incidents and the legal problems during the pandemic that we see from Chile, from Visa Fatrap, they actually had an unemployment insurance in Peru, Interfot, and also they have a new law of the regulations and the participation of the agreement of 199, the issue in Mexico, for example, that was very important because they actually managed to actually adjusted the social security in ratification of 109 Dominican Republic, Sintralom, STH, but they actually created the inclusion of a bonus, and they also worked in what it has to do with the different campaigns of IFE. That for me, the IFE was not something that was that they could not measure the totality of protection of the income of the workers because many of these did not have the IFE, and therefore it was it was a small fix for a great disease. And Panama, Senatra from Peru, intensive campaigns, and to actually have to enforce the rights. And UPAC actually developed a protocol through cell phones, so the employment and can actually see about the needs of the workers and the obligations that the employers had in regards to the protection on COVID-19, and there are different articulations by the regional network and international networks to actually change the strategies and experiences of the development of strategies and see who can take care of you in 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 health and the elaboration of of a regional guide on works for domestic employers or domestic workers for the mobilization and all the creation of spaces of experiences and strategies that we're doing right now that we believe that's very important, and also the generation of information and knowledge from the same organizations for the action of a union mobilization, and and also the collection of funds that we actually carried out of emergency, which is humanitarian aid for our members. Now, what we actually believe is that beyond all the different actions that we actually manage to do within the representations of the unions and our allies like IOM and other and many other associations, is the visualization of the work as a work, because we always say that it's work, but they don't see us as a worker. Um, those who actually help in the house, we have a motto, and I think it's worldwide level. This actually work actually helps us. We're actually workers like any other worker, and we have the same rights. And for this, we have the International Federation to actually provide support to each of our organizations, so that we actually actually recognize the rights of domestic workers. We have a long way to go. The migration issue is very important, not just in my country, but on all countries, because many different countries actually affect the migrants or think differently about the migrant workers. They don't provide the same rights those that actually are born in the country, and that's the fight that we have from the federation. It's one of the many fights that we actually have to the way and the formalization of domestic workers. Thank you so much. I know that I actually went beyond my time by my 10 minutes, but thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, Carmen.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Truly,
Toda la información sobre las
all the
actividades y todo
information
esto
and
que
different
requiere
activities, the
de tiempo
achievements that you had in the past
para
months
requerir
due
sumamente
to
importante.
COVID-19
Muchísimas
pandemic is
agradecemos
very important. So we
que se
really
tomen
want to
el tiempo
thank
para
that
compartir
you
todas
could
estas
take the
historias
time to actually
del día de
share
hoy.
all the
A
experiences.
continuación,
Next,
sigo con la intervención de
um,
Claudio
we
Salcedo,
have the
presidente
presentation
de
of Claudio
Doméstico.
Salcedo
Hogar Justo es
from
una
Hogar Justo
asociación
Hogar.
pro
It's an
derechos
association
trabajadores del hogar
of
en pro de la
domestic
justicia
care
contra el
workers in
acoso laboral.
pro
Y en
of
el día de
domestic
hoy vamos a tener
workers' justice.
temas de
They'll
prácticas y
present the
experiencia
experiences
jurídica
of public policy
legislativa
and
y
legislative
destacar la
incidents,
importancia de la
and to also
participación
to talk
activa
about the
de
active
de
participation
empleadores
and the
justos.
organization of just
Muy buenos
employers.
días,
Good
Claudio.
morning,
Adelante.
Claudio. You have the floor. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you so much for the invitation from the Pro Temporary Presidency, from the RCM. My best wishes for your work in the Pro Temporary Presidency on behalf of Mexico. It's an honor for us to have this as a country, to be the Pro Presidency. My name is Claudio Salcedo, co-founder and attorney from Hogar Justo Hogar. So actually, this is an organization that has a bit more joining efforts with other organizations for the visualizations and for the implementation of the labor reforms and of Social Security in our country. As you well know, in our country, we actually have about 2.5 million workers, domestic workers, mainly females, more than 96%, as was mentioned before, and that as of today, with the pilot program on social security, that actually last month it completed its cycle as a pilot to be converted into law, and we only have about 30,000 domestic workers, especially females, that already benefit from the five main insurance offered in the country by the institute, actually. and and also hospitalizations, pensions, and um, severance pay, maternity, anything that is done by the INS. Pero respecting all the times and movements, and also the incidents on the change of public policies in our country, we can say that the fight for the recognition of labor rights and social security has basically 20 years. Um, in this fight, led mainly by Marcelina Bautista, that through their own initiative, actually added efforts from different organizations from civil society to actually manage the changes, the legal changes in 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 the federal work and also in the Social Security law. And we had there are many years of actually knocking on doors from the different senators and presenting initiatives because it's a work that's dignified that unfortunately is actually vulnerable because of the fact that these are actually women and and that they have a condition which is less favorable, and also migrants, which is one of the points in the labor reform was actually talked about, and as he indicated that according to our laws and to international treaties, must be provided with the same treatment, but it's very complex. And I can talk about this for hours about the complexity of the issue of the defense of labor rights and the Social Security that from the three powers of the union, we had to come into agreement and to actually um, to actually work to resolve a labor issue that concluded in Supreme Court um, that actually turned about 180 degrees in 28 to revolutionize the different actions of having concreting a labor reform that complies with each of the elements of the 199th agreement. That on paper, we have the perfect legislation. This is the challenge that we have as a society, as employers, and is to comply with this law. So our law complies and covers all the different measures of the 109th agreements, but the implementation, that's a challenge. So we need to actually continue to visualizing. I want to think that in the next generation, they would not question that this is a dignified work as such, and that should be paid, and they have rights and obligations like any other work. But unfortunately, but the socioeconomic conditions of our country, um, almost 7 out of 10 workers actually work in the informality sector in Mexico, and they assume that the sector. And if we actually add the construction workers and agricultural sectors, we actually have like over 10 million people that simply do not have the rights. That it's a fundamental right to have a dignified and paid work. Our networks, if you actually want to consult all the information, they have contracts to, according to Reformer last year, they can actually download free of charge and complete the different spaces different fields according to what the workers and employees actually perceive, and you can download this information of the different benefits. Um, and this is actually mandatory. The This is always going to be a challenge in this work and its particularities that it's and the different inspections are actually complicated. So in other words, it's we have a whole judicial framework that we need to do campaigns and to visualize this and to actually implement the labor rights. And I actually exhort the of the legislative powers of Mexico that this is that we're on top of this and we need to do the corresponding reformers of this according to the intentions of the Supreme Court of Justice is for April. Um, and it's a permanent commission, and we'll expect to December. December. It took about 6 years to actually ratify the 199th agreement. But our social networks is Hogar Hogar dot org. So we're also in Facebook and then Twitter. It's an honor to actually participate in this social dialogue that it's Enrique Celas. It enriches the experiences in the region to actually to actually change the social paradigm of what this home paid homework actually is all about, and its respect and its respect towards the fundamental rights. So thank you so much, and I'm at your service.
Muchísimas gracias, Claudio Salcedo de Hogar Justo.
Thank you so, Claudio Salcedo, for this participation and of actually highlighting in the case of Mexico that is allowed to include home workers in its scheme and to provide this in this process and ratifying the um, the Treaty 189. Now, following, we're gonna have a few words. Natividad Obeso from Almundra. She will talk about the relevance of migrant workers in the fight of a human domestic rights. So, Almundra, they actually recognize refugees and domestic workers in Argentina for social justice, and they've had actions that were quite important in matters of migration regulation, also including laws on domestic workers. So, good morning, Natividad Obeso. You have the floor.
Muy buenos días. ¿Me escuchan?
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yes, we do hear you. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning.
Muchísimas gracias por darnos la
Thank you so much
oportunidad,
for the
Almudra,
opportunity to Amundra to
en este
participate
diálogo sobre
in this dialogue on the implementation
derechos laborales de las mujeres
of
migrantes en el trabajo
of
temporal e
rights for
ilegal.
migrants in paid
Muchísimas
domestic
gracias
work.
a la
Thank you so
presidencia
much to the pro-temporary
de
presidency
México de la Conferencia Regional
on
de
the regional
Migración.
conference on migration.
Muchísimas gracias
And thank
a
you
la
so much
OIT y
to
a la
ILO
Asociación de
and
México de las
also
Mujeres de México.
the National Institute of Women in Mexico.
Agradecería, por favor,
I want to
un
thank.
favor,
I
si
have a
lo pueden
PowerPoint.
pasar.
Sí, hoy te estará proyectando. Adelante, hoy.
No tenemos un PowerPoint por
We
parte
don't have a PowerPoint.
de la señora Natividad.
Sí, envié ayer y hoy día me dijo Adriana que lo iban a pasar. Bueno,
Tenemos el
We have the text. We'll show this.
perfecto, entonces voy a hablar. Bueno, AMUR es una organización que
It's
se
ANAMU is an organization that was formed in 2001.
para luchar
I'm sorry, someone else is online.
mayor de sus hijos e hijas.
Um, I'm sorry, I'm her. She's cutting it off.
micrófonos, por favor, las personas que no están hablando.
I'm
Muy
sorry.
It's
It's going in and out.
desde esa fecha hasta la actualidad, AMUNRA
So
nos
Amunra, as you recognize,
migrantes y refugiados
as a refugee migrant workers,
ser agentes de nuestro propio destino.
and to be agents of our own destination, form a social organization
Construyendo
that we will build this every single day from the fight from different types of lobbying and actually calls, and because we're actually aware of the collective actions as migrant workers that can help us actually change a reality of discrimination, of xenophobia, and of inequalities, which we fight with our dignity and our rights. Everything started with the realization of the first tribunal of migrant workers and refugees that we actually carried out in Plaza de Mayo in 2006, in where we actually evidenced the abuse of particular home care that back then were called domestic workers. The testimonies from the different colleagues were actually strong, and they actually help us to actually continue denouncing this and abuse of rights through the meetings, workshops, and visits. We actually gathered the complaints of different workers and the support of volunteers, professionals, and Fernanda Krishna actually evidence the legal unprotection that the domestic workers were actually seeing, advocating because of the vulnerability of their rights, and according to the discrimination policies that affected this section. The president, Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, finally presented the bill in 2010 collecting several proposals. The ex-president now actually took to make the decision of taking this bill on particular home care workers. In 2011, we actually did a movement to the government palace. We also reminded that in 2009, we actually delivered with different proposals by the presentation of the bill for domestic workers. I'm sorry, she's cutting in and out. And according, we say that the presidents to advocate by for this law that the Labor and Social Prevention Commission from the Senate didn't give us the necessary treatment, so they didn't show political will to pass a new normative that improved the conditions of life for this particular case. So that the Agreement 189 that was ratified from Uruguay, Nicaragua, Philippines, Bolivia, and Paraguay. And we also requested to ratify this international instrument because it clearly demands at different states the adoption of measures to ensure the protection of human rights of domestic workers in Articles 3, to promote and to make a reality the rights of liberty of association, to a union liberty, elimination of all forms of forced labor, and to recognition of their rights to a collective negotiation, among other rights. And definitely, it constitutes the rights for domestic workers. Immediately, we in 2012, with support of the Southern Fund movement, we actually started a very strong influence work together with organizations of unions and also of a public audience to approve the domestic workers law and also on Treaty 189. We actually called the national authorities and the representations and organizations, NGOs, unions, and the women's organizations of domestic workers. And then we actually invites of this symbolic work from the Chamber of Congressmen and the authorities of the government and not NGOs. All the other people that are interested in to actually say or declare something on these two critical instruments and their importance, the urgency for the protection of the rights of domestic workers. We actually saw the different will and to do collective work, and we sent several documents to the congressman, and we called by phone, and we were constantly stating this because this project was stuck in Congress, and there was no political will to actually take it out of file, and it was going to lose parliamentary status. It wasn't as priority for the congressman. Finally, due to all the incidents, the they actually managed to work on domestic workers, known as the law of 684, retracing the law 329 issued in 19 for the government. The law contains important advancements in of working 8 hours instead of 12 hours, like the decree actually indicated, and the social life of the domestic workers was almost not in existence because the agreements with the employers was done completely informally. And the increase of the yearly license for vacation, the license to disease for diseases, the amount of a half salary to a full salary for a year of full labor as a right due to maternities and also for family designation, and definitely in a few cases the rights which affected on domestic workers. Regulations, the approval of a law I actually helped the domestic workers, and without us, the world doesn't move. That was the motto that we actually used. And we had an agreement of domestic workers in Buenos Aires where we had 130,000 domestic workers grouped in two organizations throughout the countries to comply with the political objectives that for the first time we actually carried out a collective action at the national level. and where we actually determined a declaration in the Casa Rosada, and we actually had a joint document sent to the presidency, and it was a creation of the work commissions of domestic workers in the Ministry of Labor. The need that the state can actually reinforce its commitment with the dissemination of 26 law 2684, the urgency of increasing salaries and the inspection to actually of the workers and the promotion of the unions and organizations of migrant workers of particular homes, and the creation, I'm sorry, she cuts in and out, and the different specialized tribunals for the solution of conflicts, among others. I can, if you could put the last slide, please.
Hola.
Sí, esa es la última, señor Obeso.
Yes, that's the last slide that you have. That's the last slide you sent us, yes.
Perdón. Eh, a ver, ahora. Bueno, sí, gracias. Quisiera decir
I
los...
also want to mention that the challenges of the domestic workers in this fight is that you have the total registration of migrant domestic workers, the compliance of Law 1684, and fulfilling the project of domestic workers that it's in Congress to see exactly who if this can actually be achieved in the countries of this nation and the international organizations, including the organizations that actually work of migrant domestic workers in fulfilling spaces, in decision-making spaces, in the rights of domestic workers, the migrant domestic workers. For example, in Argentina, for the National Commission on Labor, the challenge for the migration, the majority of domestic workers as well as migrants, and the passing of the law in Argentina, we observe that if you know it constituted a very portion moment when we don't have the migration regulation, many migrant workers and refugees continue to be fired or detained in the homes where they should work in conditions of exploitation and with no type of protection of biosecurity. And this should start a process starting with those women that actually work in Argentina under informal work. The agreements between employers and the workers of particular homes actually constitute contract that's what you should create to actually carry out these agreements that at the same time actually allows them the regularization of their migration. Many migrant workers are actually heads of household, and they have their children in the educational system. But due to the pandemic, many children actually abandoned their studies because of lack of connectivity of internet and electrical devices and other needs. So this must be an important factor to actually include and to start the regularization of migration, and also international instruments as the Convention on Children actually asked the states to take administrative measures or legislative measures for the higher interests of the children. At the end of April, there was a regional consultation on the implementation of the Global Compact on Migration. It's in one of the roundtables, they actually had statistics of how many, what's the population, but the invisibility actually condemns the domestic workers to a greater vulnerability in this sector. So the Georgian state must invest in knowing how many are there where we are l- in into the system. There's other international systems like the Committee on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers and their Families. In the orientation note on the spaces of the COVID-19 pandemic, They should combine the states to actually promote migrant regularization in irregular situation and undocumented migrants. And these instruments of international regulation are actually framed within the protection of migrant workers, and therefore, um, it, regarding the political will of the states, so they can actually apply the laws, so they can harmonize and a protection of the human rights. Now, without us, the world does not move. Workers of particular homes, essential and generous of change. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I do apologize. Your connection was very bad. Thank you so much, Natividad, for actually sharing the importance of the collective and mobilization of migrant workers. I do really appreciate this. Now, due to time constraints, we're not going to open the Q&A session, and we'll go to the next panel. And at the end of the session, we can actually see the questions that we have for the panel members of this block. I do want to thank once again. I pass the floor to the coordinator of public policies of the National Institute of Migration that will actually facilitate this the following section. Thank you so much, the panel members, for being with us, and I pass the floor. Thank you so much, Georgina. Thank you so much for the presentations, very inspiring presentations to actually take these experiences in this process and this dialogue that we're actually generating. Now we pass over to the case and experience of Mexico, in which we actually want to know exactly what's the experience of the pilot program in the formalization of INS, the National Insurance Institute from Mexico, and the incorporation into the Insurance Institute. I'm sorry, there are many microphones that are actually open, and thank you so much for your invitation for this very important forum. It's always a pleasure to actually participate in these events and where we actually have the opportunities of actually exchanging different perspectives, not just with organizations from civil society, but also from international organizations like Mexico and other countries as well. Now, it's we had a presentation that actually addresses several of the questions that were sent to us at the end. I will see a few reflections of the lessons learned. I believe that it's a presentation which is quite brief to respect the time that we actually are assigned to us. So the first exactly is what do we actually have in the core of the pilot project to incorporate domestic workers into the insurance system of the country. So what we see have in the basics of this program is to achieve the effective insurance of domestic workers and its recognition as any other worker of the country with the same rights and with the same dignity that you represent to be actually an actual worker, a salaried and remunerated paid worker, where they respect social rights. Now, this pilot program actually grants domestic workers, as already mentioned in a previous presentation, the five insurance branches given by the institute. It's disease and maternity insurance, disability, and also insurance for childcare, which is actually recognized by domestic workers as also by a different type of of, uh, of social of 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 social severance pays and also insurance on work risk and also an insurance for severance pay and um, old age. So this protection is provided to domestic workers in general, to any worker of the mandatory scheme in Mexico. It's one of the social security schemes that is most complete in the world due to its scope and to the amount of services that it's offered. So this is the coverage that is provided through this pilot program. The next one, please. So, what are the few of the results that are specific from this pilot program throughout the time? And in April, there's more than 30,000 people that are actually insured. The average salary is about 208 pesos. And this daily average, it's 200 pesos. This is 8 times more about the number of positions registered in the previous scheme for domestic workers, which did not recognize all the different schemes of protection for domestic workers. In other words, it had a very limited coverage And the opportunity that actually provides us in matters of public policy of actually having this program is that it provides us better information to see who is registering, what is their social demographic profile, and based on that, we can actually perfect the public policies from the Mexican state. What we actually know, with the data that we actually have, is that from the register from the EANS, 68% of the people that are insured are actually females, and 32% are actually men. The majority of 25% are actually located in the metropolitan area in Mexico, in the city of Mexico. As you can see in the graphic at the left, there is we see how this program has actually evolved throughout time, and then we'll present a comparison of how the evolution is actually seen in this program, compared to the registry of all the different employees registered with the scheme. So we already mentioned that in this scheme of insurance, it's not just provided the coverage for the domestic workers, but it also covers their family core. Also, potential benefits of over 30,000 people that I see registered in the month of April. We're talking about that in reality, with this scheme, we're actually protecting over 80,000 people, including the uh, the uh, the main heads of those insurance policies, and the family members. As mentioned before, that part of the valuable part of actually having this pilot program is it provides better information of how the insurance is actually behaving of those people that register with the INS. And practically 20% of these people actually were born in the southern part of the country, and how the migration is actually given from the south of the country, which is a region that it actually provides labor towards other areas of the country, particularly in the central and the northern part of the country. And finally, to actually conclude with my reflection to respect the time assigned to me, we can see in this graph is the evolution of two series. The red line actually represents um, domestic workers. The green line actually represents the insurance of all different workers that are actually registered with the Social Security. And what are the main reflection of this? It's the impact that this can actually have on the domestic workers. What we're actually seeing, the difference of what's actually happened with the impact in the added employment, we see a very important drop coming from the effects of the pandemic and a post recovery in the case of domestic workers. And this we need to highlight this. What we see is a positive evolution. In other words, the registration of domestic workers, particularly in during the stage of the pandemic, was not affected and continued with its growth, except for a few marginal effects in 2 or 3 months in the trend that we're seeing. And it's the increase of domestic workers in the scheme, and it's the evolution that we actually want to see throughout time. Now, with this, what I actually want to see is actually present a general panorama of the registration of domestic workers in this pilot program, which is it's new and innovative in the country. And I want to see a reflection of what are the lessons learned in this. And I would actually summarize these in four. First off, I believe that as it's like no other public program in the creation of this pilot program, and also in the contextual background from this pilot program, that it was already mentioned from the mandate of the Supreme Court of Justice of the nation, and the ratification of the Treaty 199, and the change of the provisions of the government that make it mandatory, the affiliation of these domestic workers into the scheme. So this actually helped to provide this context of modification of the labor context of domestic workers, is precisely the social dialogue of how organizations from civil society, the government, as a matter of fact, the organizations such as like ILO and Mujeres, we've all concluded in this provided in this dialogue and the need of actually recognizing the need and the dignified work of these domestic workers. A second point is that we need to recall that we're trying to change a cultural aspect. The lack of recognition of the right to a dignified work for this segment of the population is historic, to be honest, and we need to change this with the effort of everyone and through promotion, a permanent promotion of the rights of domestic workers and of the obligations of the employers. So this is a task where we actually go hand in hand with the government and from civil society, and also accompanied by the international organizations that have played a very relevant role, key role in this. A third lesson learned is that we actually start on the basis that this insurance and this part of the population must be a very simple and agile insurance understood by everyone and not present an obstacle that that any person without any type of help or intensive training can actually do this in a very easy way. And that's exactly how the program was actually born. And exactly that we actually did improvements in the same coming from the dialogue that we actually had with many different organizations. And the very last one and the very last one is from the government is that compared to the public policies issue, that we actually see a law that and based on the law that actually design the program, we actually start the other way around. We actually started with the pilot program without having a legal provision, established legal provision, and this helps us because this helps us through this pilot program to see exactly how this actually evolves and to see the different workers and they're having these changes with organizations that and based on this that this scheme of operation would require some sort of improvement, and that actually happened at the end of last year and reflected on the lessons learned, that based on that is to see and to improve those lessons learned in a legal provision. Now, what the Social Insurance, Social Security scheme actually did in the Congress is reflected those lessons learned in the recommendations of what has to be or what had to be the legal provision that must be done by the Congress of the Union. Now, with this, I finish my words. Thank you. Thank you so much for this experience, which is quite beneficial, and I think it opens up a path in Mexico for the inclusion of um, the domestic workers in the country and following other practices. Now we'll listen to the advancements that Costa Rica has had in the voice of Maria Picada from the National Women's Institute of Costa Rica. If you can share with us, please, Maria Picada, exactly what have been the keys of the success, what's been the experience, and how you actually managed to advance the formalization and the questions. You can put these in the chat. If questions arise, you can put them in the chat. If for those of you who had to leave, we will definitely send the questions to the panel members so you can actually share any questions that you might have or any comments or in the chat. Now we continue with the experience of Costa Rica from National Institute of Women, and the other floor, Maria. Maria, Maria, you have your microphone is on mute. Maria from Costa Rica, are you there?
Berenice, entendemos que está conectada, pero creemos que tiene un problema.
I think she has an issue with her microphone.
Ya avisamos. Vamos a resolver.
So we'll just give them a few minutes. So you can actually present any questions or submit any questions or any comment or any point that you might consider important to include in this dialogue. Because the important thing is precisely to actually know about different experiences and to learn from experiences to see the initiatives that are arising in the region and to actually benefit ourselves from this space from the RCM and with all the international organizations that are here present and from the experiences to actually apply and to advance on this matter in in this in addressing the issues that we see with domestic workers. So while we wait for the experience of Costa Rica, then after Costa Rica, we'll see another experience, which will be quite beneficial, with the particular homes in Argentina, and we'll close this panel with the participation of Sepal. Please let me know if you consider that.
Berenice, sugeriría si podemos continuar con la otra presentación mientras
Want to go ahead and go with another presentation and
María Picado.
yes, Luis Alonso. So I'll pass with the experience of Argentina then, where they actually created a union of home aides in domestic work. So welcome, Gabriel Basellas, to actually share their experience there. From the title, it sounds quite interesting, and most likely we actually learn from this from Argentina, which is called Union of Personal Aids in Homes. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being in. All the experiences we saw was quite interesting, and we've seen in Latin America are quite interesting. And I know I only have 10 minutes. So the Union of Domestic Aids that was created in 2001 were the first union of domestic workers in 1901 actually in Argentina, and we're actually the main one in Argentina. So we have a very important role in Argentina. So next one, please. So from the personal experience that we see is for the rights of these workers, the union had a very important activity in the law 284, a work that was very tedious and very long in according to the law. In which he managed to actually do this in 2013 that replaced Decree 283, which is a government of a de facto government that the government was actually established certain obligations. Can you go to can I pass the slides myself or does that depend on you?
Puede proyectarla si gusta también.
You could do it yourself if you want. Yeah, if I could do it myself, then that'd be great.
Sí, puede proyectarla usted desde su computadora si gusta.
No lo tengo acá abierto. No, ponémelo, por favor.
Can you just put it? Yeah, if you could do it before, then if you could do it yourself, please. So the Decree 283 established more obligations than rights.
La presentación que proyectaron los colegas de
Ahí está.
la OIT.
Yeah, there we go. That's this. See, you can share your screen. No, it didn't let me. I don't know why it doesn't let me pass my own slides. But if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you.
La siguiente. Bueno, en el año 75 se creó la.
So the school for particular home aids was created for the workers of the sector. They provide social security, and also in 2006 they created the school for training, which is a very important tool of domestic workers that actually trained not just in from in the primary or elementary and high school, and also for particular homes and everything that has to do with this type of work. In 2013, it's when the law 26844 was passed, and this is for a special regimen of domestic workers. This law actually indicates the legislation indicates the 8 hours per day. It cannot exceed 9 hours per day, and a weekly 1 day off per week, and provides the benefit for the domestic workers in regards to Christmas bonus and severance pay, and something uh, also it covered about maternity. They provide 45 days and 45 days after for maternity, that according to this decree, the previous decree did not regulate this. So the law was actually passed in April 2013, and in 2013 they actually created on April 3rd. They established the day of the domestic workers. It's a holiday for domestic workers, which is quite important, to be honest with you. And in 2014, Argentina actually establishes or ratifies Agreement 185, um, and we're one of the countries in we're one of the countries in Latin America that actually ratified this agreement. As I explained, how to explain this. Also, the law actually establishes that he categorized by tasks, everything has to do with salaries, and categorized by care, which is very important in general, and specific tasks. Next slide, please. What we actually created with this law is the National Commission of Domestic Workers. That it's a discussion, a three-party discussion between employers, the states, and representatives of workers, that covers the salaries and the normative framework of domestic workers. So here, what we actually managed to see is that in 2015, we actually it was approved on April 13th, which is a holiday in Argentina for domestic workers. So this is something very important, which is done together with ILO, which is it's informative passwords on the rights of labor migration, which is also a digital application. And as he establishes the quarter for Argentina to actually prevent or avoid any fraud in regards to migrant workers. This passport was widely accepted, and it's a very good tool to actually avoid any frauds for in regards to migrant workers. The other important aspects that was created was a guide for employers, where the obligations or rights are actually indicated together. It was done together with ILO, and this is in the digital form. We see all the rights, and so the employers can actually see this before, so they can record. Um, and this was the and this is the guide of workers. Agreement 189. With this law in Argentina, we had the law on domestic workers in Argentina in 2014, as you approved or passed rather, ratifies Agreement 189. And there's a tool which is quite important, as explained before. Argentina, it was one of the countries that actually ratified this agreement in Latin America as well. So this was a participation that was done together with the Ministry of Labor. That was actually quite important when you saw the movie Roma, actually. The mobile delegations, we actually implemented a system of actually of actually taking advice and registration to different places. It's a trader that we actually have that goes to the different parts of the country, of the city of Buenos Aires. And so this is actually helps to actually register and to attend employees and domestic workers as well.
Bueno, la que sigue también esto es más
So this is part of the delegation.
bueno, esto es algo muy
So
importante que
this
está
is
por
something very
implementar
important that
próximamente
that
desde la
is
Unión Personal de Particulares.
from
Vamos a
the
abrir la Casa de la
particular
Mujer.
from
Esto es un
domestic
convenio con
workers.
ANSES
This is an agreement with
de
ANSES
reconocimiento de aportes,
in
plan
recognition
de
of
retiro
their
electrónico
contributions,
y también
of
la migración
free retirement
de la migración de
processes,
migrantes
and
y la
contribution
atención
of recognition of
sobre violencia de
contributions, and also
género
migration, and
con
also the
asistencia de
attention
psicólogos
of
y atención jurídica.
gender
Siguiente,
violence,
por favor.
medical and psychologists, and judicial advisory or
Acciones
counsel
locales.
for domestic workers.
Nosotros tenemos
Um,
el tema de
we actually
cuando
have the
la,
different
la
actions
pandemia, lo del COVID,
according to the pandemic of
incorporamos incluso
COVID,
nueva línea de
which
consulta
incorporated
temas
new different
legales,
lines in through
también fue algo muy
WhatsApp, where
importante
they can actually consult and something that was very important.
por estos
The
medios,
attention that we actually had
todo
through this media that we
proceso de
actually
la forma
provided,
virtual
and
de las
that's actually
audiencias
done
en el tribunal,
uh,
tratando de
virtually,
facilitar
and they
todo lo que pueda
facilitated all
ayudar a los
the
trabajadores en el
legal
proceso interno,
assistance
¿no?
to
Así que,
these domestic workers during the pandemic.
bueno, estas son las cooperaciones que
So
tuvimos.
this is the cooperation that we actually had, and
Con la Federación
we're
Internacional
working
de Trabajadores del Hogar,
with the Federation of
que fue algo
Domestic
importante,
Workers,
perdón,
which is called FIT. It was a very important work
tienen
that
que
we
tener
actually
el
did,
barbijo, tapabocas,
and it's actually so they
también
can actually
vimos
use masks and
capacitación
hand
de la
sanitizer,
Federación Federic
and
para hacer medios para hacer
the and
cuidarse
we
y demás,
actually
eso seguro, por
managed to
favor. La
actually
siguiente, por favor.
help them with the different posters in regards to hand
Este
washing and the
protocolo
use
que
of
se
disinfectant. This is the
estableció en el
protocol that was
sindicato
established
para
from
la vuelta
the
segura al
union
empleo, es un
for safe
protocolo
return to
en el
work.
momento de
It's
la
a
pandemia, como es
protocol
la cuarta
that was
categoría,
done
las trabajadoras se habían declarado esenciales
during the
y debían
pandemic for
volver al
domestic
trabajo de una
workers,
forma
and they
segura
have to go
como igual
back to
volver al
work in a
empleo. La
safe
siguiente,
way.
por favor.
The next slide, please.
Esto es una app de
So
retorno
this is
seguro
an app
también.
of
Esto era
safe
para ver
return, and this is actually
cómo los
see
trabajadores y los empleadores
how the domestic
los
workers and
riesgos,
employers,
prevenciones y demás.
the
La
different
siguiente, por
preventions and
favor.
risks. The next slide, please.
Esto también es una app de
So
servicio
this is
doméstico,
also an
en el
app
cual
on
dan
domestic
tutoriales
service,
y demás para
which
los
is gives
trabajadores
provides
y los
tutorials
empleadores. Esto también está la
for
aplicación de la
domestic
que comentaba
workers, and
anteriormente de
also
los migrantes.
this is the migrant
La
app.
siguiente, por favor. Bueno, esto fue una campaña
This
que se
was
hizo
a campaign
desde
that
el
was
departamento de las asociaciones
performed
de
from the
UPAC
different
en la
offices
ciudad
of
de Buenos Aires, de
UPAC
cómo
in Buenos
inscribirse
Aires and how to actually
si habían
register
registrado, si había seguimiento
if
de
they actually
vacunación.
recorded for
Las
the
sedes del UPAC se
vaccination
dividió en
campaign,
trabajadores esenciales,
and also as essential
entre los cuales
workers,
se hizo una solicitud
the government
para promover la
actually
vacunación de manera urgente de los trabajadores
provided or
migrantes en
submitted
Buenos
a
Aires, los
request to
trabajadores
actually
esenciales,
vaccinate
la
domestic
cuarta
workers
categoría,
because since
y
they're
el
considered
trabajador
as
obligado.
essential
La
workers
siguiente, por favor.
during the fourth stage.
Bueno, esto es lo que hablábamos
So
anteriormente, que
this is
no
what we
es
actually mentioned
trabajo, no es
before, that
ayuda,
this
esto
is
somos
it's work and it's not
sensibilizando a las
help. We're
trabajadoras
actually
y a los
making people aware,
empleadores
domestic workers
para
aware,
tener
and
en
employers
cuenta
aware
que
that
no
they
es
should
no es
consider
un
that this is
trabajo.
not
Por favor, la
some
siguiente.
help. This is work.
Bueno, acá lo que hablaba anteriormente,
So
los
what we actually
trabajadores
mentioned
esenciales
before
en
is that this is
particular,
essential worker for
están haciendo
particular
que se reconozca lo que
domestic
hablábamos
workers to actually
recién con la
recognize their work.
la siguiente. Bueno, esto es cuidar igualdad,
So this
pobreza,
is to take care of
bueno, el
equality
tema de los cuidados, el gobierno nacional,
and
municipal y
the
provincial,
national
las asociaciones
government and
civiles y las
municipal and
federaciones y los
national and local
sindicatos,
government and the different
gestión
unions
de
actually
los
help.
espacios comunitarios de
They actually have
comunicación.
the
La
community
siguiente, por
spaces
favor.
to actually make people aware of this.
Estas son las rondas nacionales de
These are the
sensibilización.
national roundtables of awareness. It's a central
Siguiente.
commitment.
Bueno, la que sigue, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Esto es la mesa sindical.
So this is the union roundtable on care work, on
Estos son los
caretakers.
compromisos, lo que se han
These
firmado
are
en
the
los distintos convenios
commitments that was
entre
signed, the
empleadores
different
con
agreements from the
trabajadores
different employers
particulares,
and
sindicato UPAC.
domestic
La que
workers
sigue.
from UPAC.
Esto también fue. No, está bien. Esto es el compromiso. Ahí
So
está.
this is the commitment. This is it,
Sobre
right? This is the
diversidad
commitment
sexual en las organizaciones
on
sindicales, pensar sobre un trabajo
on
libre de
sexual
violencia,
diversity and
prevención de
work
la
without
violencia de género,
violence, to recognize
cuidado y
the
la corresponsabilidad
the policies and the core responsibilities of family work and the observation of the rights of domestic work. So this is the training academy and training school. This was the virtual platform that we did for this COVID, and it's a very important tool, and it's done through Zoom. And we actually continue with these classes virtually, as we did this, and this is continued during the pandemic to actually continue with this training. So this was an app that was created to actually address a major issue during the pandemic that due to many domestic workers actually charge their work once at home. So when people can actually charge virtually, and they can do and they can actually pay for their salaries during the pandemic in Argentina, the domestic workers they, they would actually be legally advised to actually help them with the collection of their salaries. I think this is very important so that many can actually receive their salaries. The trainings on awareness on the law was on law 268044, and from the different delegations that we have in the school. So this is the different courses from the Trading Academy. And this is an articulation that we did on RIT, ART, together with UPAC. We carried out the talks to employers in regards to COVID and how to file a complaint and if someone was infected in um, in their areas of work. Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for presenting this experience from the Argentina point of view. That these are best practices that are specified within the COVID pandemic. How is this actually framed? Because of course there are digital gaps we're facing. We actually see in COVID, we see they're having these process being generated in a space that's accessible and accessible. It's very important to have these spaces. Now, before we pass to the following panel member, we can see the experience from Costa Rica. I also want to remind everyone that we can emphasize with the migrant workers that what are they identifying and seeing, promoting, what are their experiences in what's being shared in best practice. We can actually emphasize on this.
La palabra a
Now we pass the floor to Maria from Costa Rica. Are you ready, Maria? Yes. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. So you have the floor. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone that's here participating. What I actually want to share with you is the experience in regards to the different actions and to formalize domestic workers here in Costa Rica that has been led from the National Institute of Women and with the supports mainly from the ILO, which has been a huge ally in this process. First off, I think it's important to actually identify who are these people, who are the domestic workers. The 24% of these are people from Nicaragua. It's about 170,000 domestic workers that we actually managed to actually identify within the country. It's important that we're very clear of a sub registry, and this sub registry is mainly due to migrant workers that unfortunately are actually in condition of informality in Costa Rica, and we see this afterwards with a few numbers of insurance. We have these 170,000 workers. 24% of these are from Nicaragua. These are women in the majority, but we also have a few men that actually work in this area. They actually live in couples, and they're between 39 and 50 years of age. So 45.4% of these are actually heads of household. this work actually represents for the families of these women is quite crucial. So we actually work with domestic workers. We're going to have an impact at the family core point. So another issue that I want to highlight that we want to emphasize on the insurance part, INAMO considers that to formalize this, we should have consider other aspects where the insurance is one of these aspects. So where she working on this on the wage profile, labor rights, integral health, the strengthening of organization of domestic paid workers, because this organization actually allows the access to the rights and the incorporation of this work. We're going to see this within the national system of employment, which is very important. Go to the next slide, please. In regards to the insurance, I have to indicate that 55.6%, 51.7% are actually insured by a family member or they're not insured at all. And this is very important to indicate. And from these, 95% of those domestic workers have different employers. So we need to seek a way how those employers can actually contribute. And this is one of the reforms that the Social Security Bureau of Costa Rica has actually done in Costa Rica. 94% of these people are actually dedicated exclusively to this employment, and they should do this by hours. So we have 90% of these are actually Costa Rican, but I mentioned this. This is coming from the registries or the records of insurance. So 90% of those that are insured are actually in fact Costa Ricans, what tells us a very low percentage of women, migrant women from other countries that are, especially from Nicaragua, they're actually being insured, and this sub record they are actually are not identified in this process, and it's very difficult to actually map these individuals out. In 2017, under this reality, they reformed the model of domestic workers insurance in Costa Rica. This reform contains the general provisions so that any physical employer that employs one or more domestic workers must comply with the obligation of including them as paid domestic workers in those according to the health and insurance systems and to create based on on a minimum scale of reduced contributions. So this is very important because this actually allows to actually have a difference of a certain type of insurance for those that are actually the salaries are actually under that minimum contribution amount or above that. So this actually this actually creates a special insurance for domestic workers that are actually under the minimum number. So the CCSS, the Social Security Bureau of Costa Rica, actually it creates a special regimen solely for domestic workers and intends actually to facilitate the processes and to actually arrange the different payments to the Social Security to a lower amounts that we'll see this later on. This is a mode, a special modality. Like as I mentioned, it's what this allows is that multiple employers that they're on obligation of actually ensuring these domestic workers can actually do so. What it does is to promote it promotes that more employers can insure the domestic workers, then the amount that they actually pay for that insurance is going to be lower. So the installment or the payment is a payment that's actually split among all the employers from that person. So what's attractive is so that the employers doesn't have to they don't have to pay um, the total amount as if it was just one employer compared to many. And another mode is that the supervision of how this is being carried out from the CCSS is not with the employer, but directly with the domestic employer. And this is the one that should report exactly how that you see in this process. So this is the summary of this. We have a traditional regimen mode, and we have a special regimen mode, which is the one that we're actually fostering from or since 2017, which has a few special characteristics. The the employers must be up to date and paying the minimum salaries, and they must be updating their data constantly.
So here we see more or less how this actually works at the um, at the resource level. We see a traditional worker, they would pay like 165 wage. This is just an exercise. They would pay $17. In the special, the employer only pays 109, and they only paid $51. And the state that before they would pay $7. Now they would pay $30. What we're doing with this fund is that the state is actually assuming the payment a little bit more, a higher amount of that amount, and it stimulates the employers to actually pay so that the majority of these workers when they have one or more employers that can actually work throughout the week and they can actually receive an equal share of this. We did the same exercise, but after the change where she increased the minimum amount from 165 to 245. But we explained the mechanism of how this actually works. This is a very interesting number. This graph actually shows the information from the amount of insured individuals under the salaried scheme. Now, this insurance actually allows them to have access to insurance of health and also the retirement fund. So we're not just talking about that they can actually access to Social Security, but also a pension, and not just domestic workers from other categories. Many of them are actually protected through a family member or through some other system. In these last categories, the advantage is that the beneficiaries only have access to health and not to pension. What we're interested in is for them to have having both benefits, pension and insurance. So these numbers are to 2021, where we see an increase of 4,000 people more insured after the implementation of this measure. So between 2007, 2018, we see the increase of this number that were actually insured. And clearly, this actually goes down in 2020 due to pandemic, where the domestic workers were one of the most affected population. What this graph actually presents is that we have this model, and we need to actually check to actually assess the different adjustments and see exactly how the main challenge is that they can continue reporting and then to actually see an increase of the amount of work of workers that are actually insured. So this is in regards to insurance. The other fundamental aspects is the formulation is the improvement of their salary profile. As you can see in this picture, what we're actually seeing over here is that a minimum salary of a common worker of 309,000 colones, and the domestic workers is 190,000 colones. So the domestic workers are actually earning a lot less of the minimum wage, and this is a huge gap that we have in Costa Rica with domestic workers. So we actually worked on a new proposal of occupational profiles of domestic workers that actually includes the social economic characterization of domestic workers. And this is very important because we actually find out that the household that are actually employing domestic workers, they are actually capable of actually paying an increase of the salary of domestic workers. Now, the interesting part of this profile is that this profile actually establishes or actually channels the domestic workers from this occupational sectoral perspective. In other words, first we actually visualize, actually recognizes what they're doing, and actually adds a value to what they're actually doing. So we have three different categories of salaries: the unqualified, domestic, and also the those who actually do home care, and those who are so workers who are supervisors of domestic service. We'll see very generally in this point, we see that the salary, it doesn't really say much in regards to the different categories of salaries from other countries, but we actually see is that we actually have these three profiles: the unqualified occupation domestic workers, as he has a lower salary of 270,000 coronas. And then if that person, domestic workers, besides doing this work, also takes care of people and to see exactly how their salary actually increases, that must person must have of 100,000 coronas. And if they actually do this, but besides that, they actually need to supervise to actually organize different work teams and other supervise other people, then we're talking about an increase of their salary as well. This actually allows to give an added value to the work that you're doing and differentiate the different salary ranges to pay a just fair or just wage for their work. So this is according to the national wage scheme, and but INAMO is actually advancing this line. Another important aspect that has to do with the formalization of domestic workers is integral health. We have actually done several campaigns in this. The very last one was done in terms of COVID. Domestic workers are continue here, and this is actually guided towards employment. A few of domestic workers for protection, and other for employers as well. Let's go on to the next one. So this is an example of what the campaign actually worked on, what to do when they have a schedule change, when they have to use masks, and to provide with different PPE, and see if they have any symptoms of COVID-19. And then afterwards, in the integral health, we actually INAMO actually has services of intention for attending moments of situations of violence. Domestic workers have actually reported the different situations of violence in the households where they're actually working, and this assistance is done through different spaces at the regional level and at the central level. And also, we have the continuation of the Office of Coordination from the Ministry of Social Security. Now, we believe that it's important to actually have this relationship between of on health, so that because someone in a situations of violence cannot advance certain processes of the formalization. In other words, her health formalizations are completely joined as one. Also, we also have labor rights. We actually created the different campaigns and disinformation of what to do with different cases in regards to this. We actually managed to actually recover the frequent questions from domestic workers in regards to labor rights. We actually done campaigns mainly through WhatsApp. We actually find that the domestic workers, especially migrants, what they're actually using is they're using mainly WhatsApp. The majority of them actually have a cell phone, and they get actually access to prepaid phones and phone services. So this is a very useful instrument to actually communicate with them through WhatsApp. We've also done work with the NGOs and with the different radios. All the work that's done at INAMU in informative campaigns is done in alliance with several organizations of domestic workers, national and migrants that are actually the ones that actually finally actually validate the work of communication and the different messages, and we build this together, but they see validate before this is validated before um, posting this information. So this is paid work. For example, the development of a specific module for domestic work in the national employment system. The national employment system is a tremendous system where we are actually gathering all the needs of employment, and we actually contact different employment employers, the people that actually want to work, and we're actually fostering is that they can actually develop within the new system a specific module for domestic workers that actually includes information on employers and includes the information of different rights. We can include their profiles. This is the challenge that we have of what to do with those workers that are actually in condition of irregularity. And what we actually want, of course, is to actually achieve to actually regulate the different uh, migration status of these workers, but also provide the added value as a formal work and the work that is that's visualized, for example, through the national system of employment. That's why we actually want a specific module that actually provides that the seriousness as a task. We also want to train all the employment managers in matters and focusing on gender according to the particularities of paid domestic work. There's also the strengthening of the organization. We're actually betting on the cooperation of the domestic workers. We actually believe the fact that we can actually organize them through cooperatives. I think this is going to strengthen them. It's going to help them to actually formalize. And we are working on a pilot program, which is the formation of a co-op of domestic workers, and they're actually specialized um, in care of senior citizens. So this is very important for those domestic workers that were actually unemployed due to the pandemic, but also as a response to a need of the country, which is the attention of care of older citizens that actually allows us to actually attend several other things. The need of attention or care for the economic recreation of the countries, and also labor options that are sustainable, and also formal options for women uh, in regards to the work, since they are already domestic workers and they're not being recognized for such. This is the very last slide that I actually have. I just want to indicate that the space of the work that they actually the process of incidents that you carried out is in a domestic work from INAVO, where you have the Ministry of Labor and ILO and the Organization of Domestic Workers. In this space of influence, we actually work and work on different things: the occupational profile, domestic workers, the issue on certification of competences, the campaign on COVID protection, the labor rights campaigns, the differentiated models of insurance, and the strengthening of labor inspection, which is very important because the labor inspection in this country must be must be formed specifically and how to actually carry out a labor inspection when the spaces are at a home at a house, and the coordination with the national employment system. And right now we're at a very important stage, which is the support from the Ministry of Labor in the domestic work national policy. I think this is pretty much it for on my end. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Maria, and quite illustrative and detailed the each access and the differential estimates that you've done in Costa Rica to actually expand these rights or this access to these processes of domestic workers. Now, before we have Sepal, we are actually taking notes of all your questions, and we have the very last presentation, and we'll read this intervention or this presentation. Um, and so you continue with all the exchanges we had in the chat. And now, Ana Wesmedes, it's a pleasure to actually have you here with your very broad experience in the focus in gender with the different workers, domestic workers from CEPAL. So we will wrap up with this with the presentation to have this presentation on the dimensions and numbers and the indicators of domestic workers, the migrant domestic workers in the region. Anna, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Berenice. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone. It's great to see everyone from the government of Mexico that has the CRM, the RCM presidency. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to actually have this joint work with IOM as well, and also the representatives of the government, employers, employment, and especially the different federations of workers and the international federations that actually accompany us today, and that we've always actually worked hand in hand and accompanied throughout this path. And the first thing that I actually want to actually address is the articulation of from this regional agenda from the Convention 189 to talk about in regards to of where this labor sector was located prior to the pandemic, and what has happened, what have the countries have actually done, and what are we recommending for this part. And with this said, I also I'd love to hear. I'd love to have heard other experiences from Mexico, Costa Rica, and Argentina that actually shows that it is possible to advance within this difficult context like we're seeing and living through this right now. COVID actually actually illuminates two different aspects that are actually quite relevant for this conversation that we're having. First off, is the importance of care, the importance that the care actually has to sustain life and the different, the care of the planet and the people, the importance of the importance for sustainability, and also it actually puts on the table that this work of care has been carried out mainly by women in an unpaid way in different households, or very badly paid, um, or very unequal rather in different households. So systematically, this is a structural issue in Latin America. The sexual division of this work and the precarious conditions of the work of the domestic paid domestic work, but also we've seen how we see 75% of the professionals from health professionals are actually female, um, and there's also it's a sector that that it still it sees salary gaps and extended work schedules. So we're proposing from CEPAL is to actually let's analyze if the care is so if care is so important for the world, we need to talk sit down and talk about everything that's going on with the care of our societies, and to see exactly what's going on traditionally in the domestic work, paid domestic work. We've actually seen different gender inequalities, of ethical and racial inequalities. Normally, it's associated to internal migration, women, sometimes little girls, um, uh, which is something it's something about child labor that we need to talk about as well. And they migrate to the different big cities with the different corporations, the different migration corridors that we're seeing. We're actually seeing the growing corporation of migrant workers. So the national origin is a different element that is actually added to these chains of inequalities that we should see in regards to this work. So the regional agenda on gender, actually, and the Convention 189, which is very important, that actually comes from all this fights and all this consensus that actually is done within the framework of ILO, reflects this idea of setting minimum standards, actually recognizing the domestic workers, that this is actually a work that must have the same rights of protection than the rest of the salaried workers. And also it's a relevant topic in the previous convention, um, carried Santiago in 2020. So these rights that must be revisited in during the pandemic, because it's very clear that either pandemic or either climate crises like that we saw in Central America or in the Caribbean, either migration movements, we this is something that this is highly vulnerable. And it concerns us to actually talk about this, and that we're actually here with ILO and with IOM, and that one without a two women in the region is actually works in situations of high vulnerability in regards to crisis, because that's why it's quite interesting, this idea of unionized co-ops that allows for dialogue among other sectors. Tourism in Mexico is very important. These sectors of tourism, manufacturing, commerce, etc., is very important. So I believe that one of the recommendations is to see migrant workers in its diversity as well. So, as you mentioned, what the previous situation was, it's something that is very important for women, as mentioned by a few of you. Like 12% of women in the region actually work as domestic workers. The majority are between 12 or 15 million women from the region, of the people from the region. The majority of them are actually women. uh, inferior salaries, as she mentioned by the representative of INAMO from Costa Rica, that from other categories, they don't actually reach the minimum salary. For example, Dominican Republic, Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Many of the different countries in that actually reports are don't even reach this minimum salary. And even though this is a region, Uruguay was the first country that actually ratified Convention 189. That several countries actually have actually ratified this agreement. There's a high level of non-compliance with the obligation of actually formalization. It's about 3 out of 4 workers are actually in the informal sector without any type of protection from Social Security, even though about the obligation that they actually have for this. So we believe that's very important. As you mentioned, this is not just to have a normative framework, but and deal with campaign, the promotion of formalization, and measures of overseeing, and this actually goes beyond the insurance of. We've talked about this in this region. So the issue of the crisis and the global chains of care that we've actually seen, that we've actually been working on this, not just between countries or bordering countries, but also in migration, international migration, and this also covers by the convention before the pandemic. We already knew that that uh, the region is more half of the migrants are actually females. With this, the women have also changed how they see migrate. Many times, women actually migrants looking for better opportunities or fleeing areas of conflict and situations of violence in their own countries. However, we must indicate that this sector is important for the for women, as mentioned, is 11%. We talk about migrant women. We're talking about in domestic work occupies about a third of this part. So it's a lot more important for migrant women to have this intersection between all these different sectors. Now, what has happened during the pandemic is I see mentioned the women in Latin America, and this is an issue of the productive issue of the region. We actually participate a lot less in the labor markets. We actually do this in sectors of the economy with lower wages, with a greater informality, and more vulnerable to the risk coming from the different economic crisis, like the one from 2008, or this crisis, which is economic and sanitary crisis that domestic workers cannot, work in general. And this is one of the this is a situation that we're seeing, and within the context where the main measure is the restriction of the mobility and confinement. So we're actually talking about a loss of employment in the region, in Chile, Costa Rica, Colombia, and numbers we see have it's about 45%. And in other countries, according to the surveys, we're actually seeing numbers um, around the 30%. Mexico, Dominican Republic. This is just one of the sectors that has been hardest hit during the pandemic due to the economic crisis. And the survey done by the international domestic workers and their affiliates between May and April of this year, about 49% are actually unemployed. This same survey actually indicates something that's quite concerning, which is 68% of the domestic workers they were the main income of the family. So the loss of that income generates tremendous tremendously in their survival. The migrant workers actually face additional issues, less access to support networks, normally a bit more precarious households, and many migrant workers. We've actually seen this for example, in my very last assignment in Colombia with Venezuelan workers, the importance of remittances is not just for their own survival, but also for their family members the impossibility of actually sending remittances back to their family members, and what has been mentioned about workers in irregular situations are actually excluded from the social security provided by the government. So this is something that we simply cannot omit. What measures have we actually documented in Separa? We actually have a COVID observatory where he managed to have a window of gender where our countries are actually reporting this. So what we will see in this massive firing of the a massive loss of employment we see this past year. There are very few countries that actually have unemployment insurance that actually cover these types of sector. Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, and other countries like Costa Rica, for example, reported special programs that support unemployment with help during unemployment. Argentina, for example, we saw this is quite interesting. They actually considered as essential workers, which actually gave a special permit through this passport that we saw that actually allowed them to actually mobilize during times of pandemic. Another case we've actually seen the social exit, the transfers, in the majority of the countries that actually um, they covered this according to the studies of CEPAL, and they actually see the distribution of credits and payment for services, distribution of basic services and of hygiene, and in general, these transfers have been led to households of low socioeconomic income, which the majority of domestic workers actually are located in. So we've it's not it's included there, but also it's because it's actually focused on the different groups and different households with lower income. So we've also seen a few countries that actually developed some sort of support to informal workers, but this has been not that much. And also for the migrant population, what we actually seen is that they've actually established requirements of minimum stay to actually access to the benefits, and then many times it's it's very difficult to actually access this. Also, we actually want to actually highlight something positive. It's been the mobilization of organizations, specifically, for example, the workers, for example, the regional campaign Cuida que Cuida, that he sees, visualizes the situations, and also advances. For example, in Peru, they see passed uh, domestic work in October of last year. The workers from Chile actually incorporated into the severance pay, as same as the rest of the of workers. That simply that they do not have that this right. So we could also do things like that have been mentioned here. Now, what are we proposing from the regional point of view, from the CEPAL in this context? So first off is that from the very beginning of this year is the vaccination, the first time vaccination. So the domestic workers, the majority of them are actually responsible of services of care. These are first line workers. Now, without their work, many families or households cannot work, and the type of mobilization and relationship that they actually have for every day, it's very common to actually work in different households. So it's extremely important to actually assess one to protect the employment and to actually vaccinate in the strategies of first line workers of or for domestic workers. We believe that's quite interesting that Costa Rica is actually doing of actually categorizing this because it's a step towards the professionalization of this work. Also, it's the unemployment insurance. We're actually proposing this. I believe it's key, especially in those countries where we have a mechanism and domestic workers they don't have access to this, which is completely discriminatory. So We believe that it's an advance with an unemployment insurance with a minimum wage, which is that's a proposal that CEPAL has actually done in general, but also the countries that already have this, this would be clearly included. The other issue is that this insurance most likely would have to be, or these measures of support must be extended for domestic workers. The recovery is going to be a lot slower, precisely because of this hybrid strategy that we're seeing throughout the different countries. That actually you come back to work and there's an opening, and then there's a second wave, and then they continue to close, open and close, open and close. So now that the countries have actually had the public budgets, they need to budget in the long term so that they can actually truly, so that this situation of quarantine is not an interruption in their income. And we know that this situation will last at least uh, this year. The other is the minimum wage. As mentioned before, it's necessary to actually oversee the compliance of the minimum wages that have been fixed, the countries that actually have this, and also to apply the 100 Convention 100, which is a professional um, the professional equivalency of the profession. Also, the idea of actually recognizing the importance of actually promoting employment and employment formalization. So this is it could be done through the fiscal incentives that the countries actually have for the private sector. These could also should be accessible to domestic workers. The support of organized women, the different federations and national organizations, co-ops, unions, and the different modalities of organization, but also the support of organizing workers into social dialogue that's done systematically by ILO and these national roundtables, which are actually crucial. It's like I said, it's actually very important. And an additional measure that we are actually proposing for Latin America is digital connectivity. So 4 out of 10 women in Latin America, or they simply don't have internet connection, or if they have it, it's quite expensive. Nobody through their cell phone, and it's very expensive. So they can only be connected to the internet either through WhatsApp when they actually have Wi-Fi and whatnot. So what we're actually proposing is that from CEPAL is that the digital inclusion of women is key for their economic autonomy, and that this actually imply effective connectivity. In other words, access to to a to a digital device. I see having real connectivity, programs information, and programs on the development and economic incentivization that can actually be achieved through these applications, and of course, the idea of economic mobility and the potentiality of actually organizing this work. So this is being proposed, and I believe that's quite important, um, joined to the fact that that they should actually have these devices at home for education. But we believe that it's quite crucial that women are actually included in the digital world right now, and those are actually left behind. It's an issue of inequality. So this can actually provide to this issue of digital payment and women's bank and access to formation, education, the interoperation of the different organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And lastly but not least, like I actually mentioned, we've actually proposed the idea that the recovery in Latin America we cannot go back to the same place we were before, but it's a recovery that should be transforming, and that actually puts equality and gender equality and sustainability in at its core. So this happens, of course, through what we've actually called the care to to society as core, where actually takes care of the family and the planet, and those people who actually take care of us. And as I see indicated, the representative of INAMU and the mujeres, women, and those actually work with the different mechanisms to advance women's issues. There's an historic debt. Uh, we simply cannot. This is not an issue of domestic workers, of employers, or the mechanism of social protection. I believe that this is something of society as a whole, and of course, and from the different organizations from the UN, um, being led by the ILO on these matters and also on migration issues. But it really must have this opportunity to revisit the measures that are actually being that are actually being done right now, and actually recommendations. I would say that are recommendations that are truly transforming. Um, Towards a formalizations, towards a professionalization in creating a sector. We've actually proposed, the US is actually doing this as well, and how
los
we could
cuidados
actually
como un
propose,
sector
for
dinámico,
example, um, this we know it's going to be more than necessary to actually reactivate the economy and to actually generate unemployment of equality, not just for women. Of course, we're not just saying that the professionalization should not just be, it
de
should be
allá
feminized,
también.
but it's
Bueno,
precisely that we
eso
can
sería un
have
poco,
a lot more mobility. So that's pretty much the conversation, and we will continue working with all of you in generating data. We have a huge challenge. I believe that there's a huge challenge on
que
this matters that what we hear today, and it's migrant women and how we actually typify the different global chains in care, the different regional chains of care that most likely will change um, in the following years, where the different needs of care would not stop growing. I think this is something. This is the reality. So we need to professionalize the care and put this at the center of the economy. And I believe that this is key, and to talk about the entire dimension of care, especially from the paid domestic work. Thank you so much.
Ana, muchísimas gracias. Fabulosa
Thank you so
cierre
much
con este
of a fabulous
muy
wrap up to this dimension and context
de las
analysis of
diferentes
the
mujeres,
intersectors
de las
from
diferentes
the different factors, from the different conditions that we must consider. Like I said, very important, in particular on on migrant women. I believe that this inequality that we have specifically in migrant women in the different sectors. We have very little time for the wrap up. We have only 4 minutes to wrap up. I know there's several questions. We do have 4 minutes. I know that we cannot expand much on this. Otherwise, let me know. But these 4 minutes, unfortunately, we're not going to have time to open up the microphone to everyone. But I can read a few of the questions, and please put your questions or post your questions that you have, because what we're going to do is that we're going to actually send this information to the different panel members that actually participated in this session. There's a series of questions for Mexico in regard to the pilot program from INS, and Costa Rica in function of the different actions of domestic workers, and specifically for Nicaragua and the rest of Central America. What I can actually summarize very generally from the questions that have been seen is how are you identifying the access to these pilot programs, to these experiences, and how you identify that access from migrant women and refugees, of course. How are you documenting and systemizing the different nationalities and different profiles to actually support how easy is it to access migrant women without migration documentation, those that are actually just subjected to one employer, and they simply can actually have generate these best practices. How are you facilitating, um, based on the question, how are you actually seeing this for those migrant domestic migrant workers
to actually benefit from the different programs, and they're actually subjected to a scheme of a registration in most of the countries in the region. So in order to actually break that to close that gap and difficulties that you actually proposed in your questions or comments, I believe that this very extremely broad question would be I honestly don't think if there's enough time to actually provide a 1 minute answer from the different panel members. I know we have very little. Unfortunately, we have very little time. We have 10 more minutes. Okay, perfect. So we have 10 more minutes. Okay, so in general, we'll see these questions or read these questions. The person from INS from Mexico had to leave. So we will send certain questions that were given to Mexico specifically. But if it's okay with everyone, I will pass the floor to the panel member for a very brief 1 minute response on how to actually close this digital gap. Like I said, for undocumented migrant women if they have no documents. And how to include this, considering that migrant women, many of them are actually indigenous, mostly are more are Afro descendants, and according to the different factors that have been presented. So I will close with this very general question. I do apologize that we cannot address the other questions. We will provide follow up. And there's been a fabulous roundtable from the very beginning. And if if we actually do a round from the first intervention. So, Maria Picado, you have the floor. Yeah, just very quickly, I actually wanted to actually answer one of these questions. Costa Rica has advantage. That's a very small country. We actually managed to actually have contact with women through irregular conditions through the different NGOs actually organized of domestic workers. We have three NGOs, main NGOs actually work with migrant women, with domestic workers. And it's because it's through those organizations we can actually manage to actually address this population. And also, I want to indicate in the framework of COVID, there was no restrictions, or any person, independently of the migration status, can actually access all the health services. That's just something that I actually wanted to actually indicate to all of you. Excellent. That's a very good practice to actually take into consideration. So, if so, I will pass the floor to um, uh, Luis is not there, but we have Maria Picado and Gabriel Basiles, and also um, more questions can be shared. How can we actually favor migrant and refugee women and their access to the different programs, not just for insurance, but also to different topics that have been mentioned from the different gaps of inequalities.
Sí, sí.
Puedo contestar,
So let me answer this, and just allow me. This is from Argentina. Gabriel had to leave for 1 second, but let me see if I can answer this. So first off, the main thing in Argentina, we do have a immigration law or system that actually equals the rights of domestic workers. Law 2664 actually covers not just domestic
sino también las
workers
migrantes.
from national ones, but also migrant workers. What
Migración
we're
es
actually doing from our organization point of view is to actually articulate with immigration, with the Ministry of Immigration and Migration, to actually carry out or facilitate these migrant workers, the domestic workers, migrant domestic workers, to all the access of documentation that they should require to actually be in Argentina. So this agreement or this convention actually gives the possibility from the
más
different organizations to actually access and flexible and ease the situation. For example, of actually scheduling a date and have a direct connection, so that they can actually not triangulate this and from different parts actually have this access easily. So what we're actually doing from our behalf. Thank you so much. Also,
Y
yes.
me podría
Adelante.
dar la palabra.
Claro,
Can
Nadia,
I can I
adelante.
can I use the floor? Yes, of course,
Bueno,
please.
en primer lugar, ustedes
So
saben
first off, you know that the organization is specifically of migrant women and refugees. So we have a very long history of more than 18 years working. That one of the main axes is to regularize migrants, and the information. In a few documents that we should share in the chat. There's the Radix program where we actually provide tools to migrant workers so that they can actually access their regularization. So we actually go to the neighborhoods, we actually go to different hospitals, we go everywhere where these these women are located, and we actually address them. We actually talk about the connectivity issues. We actually try to communicate with them through WhatsApp or Facebook. The fact is that we have a program here with Radix, so we actually try to actually reach them. Well, I believe that we actually ask all the general audience that we should be responsible in the information of domestic workers, specifically other refugees, especially because of bad information. Practically, instead of helping them, we actually make things a bit more difficult. So we've actually left our the phone number from our organization, and in regards to migration regularization, we do this every day, and we have a team that we actually support them, and we actually accompany them, and they were actually continuously actually updating the information. I think this is very important for all the community that are actually listening to us, because many times we actually copy and paste information, but we don't provide any follow up. So I think we must do this so that the information should be valid and updated. And this is something that within the organization, Amruna, we actually do. So all the different colleagues around the world, if they come to Argentina, please contact Amunra. Their migration regularization, um, they don't face the situations of vulnerability, because we actually provide us support and accompany them in everything. Thank you so much, Natividad from Amunram, and Claudio
Nos pudiera
Salcedo.
compartir
If you
brevemente,
can
por
share
favor,
briefly
esta
exactly
respuesta.
your comments on this question.
Claudio,
Claudio,
¿estás, Claudio,
are you there, Claudio?
en línea? Si no está Claudio, por ahora
Okay, so I
podemos
guess Claudio isn't here, so we can actually pass. Actually, we can go
a Gabriel Baseiles, por
to
favor,
Gabriel Vaselis
para la inclusión de mujeres migrantes
for the inclusion of refugees and migrant women in domestic work.
Ay, disculpa, disculpa, sí.
I do, but you already said yes, so but we go to Maria, and we'll close with Ana Huespas. So okay, so thank you so much. I just want to indicate that I believe that it's one of the factors of success of anything that we actually do is that we this must be done, like I mentioned before, in a formal space where migrant women are actually properly represented with the domestic work roundtable and the public institutionality, which include international cooperation, which include people from UNHCR, and also we include the different
que en este caso es una
women's
organización
organizations. In
específica
this case, these
que
are specific
trabaja
organizations that actually work in
y
northern
dos
border,
organizaciones que trabajan en el
and
centro
two organizations that
recogen
actually
toda la
work
información
in
de esas
in the
mujeres
center, gathering
que
information from
trabajan de una
these
manera
women that actually
informal
work
en
in
y en
the
otro tipo de
informality
trabajos.
in domestic work and other types of
Por
work.
medio de estas
Now,
organizaciones, ellas
through
se
these
convierten como en
organizations,
agentes
they
de
actually
promoción de
turn into agents of promotion of different rights and agents of trading. During the pandemic, we actually distributed some baskets with food, and they can actually access the different protection schemes. So it's key
la
to actually
voz de
have them
mujeres
to have the
migrantes,
voice of these
después
migrant women,
tener la colaboración con
and
ellas, porque
also to
no
have the
sería
collaboration
posible.
with
Solo
them,
la
because
institucionalidad
otherwise it would be
pública
impossible.
me
Just
parece
the
que no
public
puede hacerse. Es en un espacio
institutionality, it
concreto,
simply
pero
cannot
además
cover
el
this. It's
INAMU
a
tiene la
specific
obligación de
action,
hacer
but
una
also the INAMO
transversalización
has the
de
obligation
el enfoque de
of
género y de
actually
interseccionalidad en cualquier
actually
política que se
having of this focus on gender, because it's the policies that we actually have. So it's an obligation that if it's a policy on employment of what's going on with us, with specifically with migrant women, if it's issue with health,
and same thing with any other indigenous women and Afro descendants. We have this aspect that allows us to actually send this
Relinam en
work
cuanto a
of
transversalización, pero después de acciones y
but
servicios
also
concretos
a different
que se
actions, specific
realizan con
services and actions that are carried out together with them, with the different NGOs. So these are the NGOs are actually critical and key for this. Thank you so much, Maria. And we'll wrap up with the intervention. Remind everyone that the presentations are actually were sent out. If not, we can send this over to you, and we'll go to specific questions to Mexico that had to
Y
leave.
pasamos con este cierre.
And
Tiene Ana
we'll close up
Westmes
with
tu
this.
mensaje,
And
Ana,
Anya
para la
Westmith for your
inclusión
message
de
for
migrantes
the
refugiadas.
inclusion of migrant workers and refugee
Sí,
females
muchas
into domestic work. Say thank you
creo
so much.
que
I
la
think
idea de
that
la
that
recuperación y de
the
la sociedad de
idea
los
of
cuidados
this
pasa
recovery
por un
and
reconocimiento real, lo que llamamos
it's to be really recognized. We call some
proveen cuidados.
substantial
Y
recognition
yo
those
creo
that actually provide care, and I believe that I think that the achievements of all workers that should ratify Convention
estos
189, but
mecanismos de
also
seguimiento y
through
de
all these different
aplicación y
mechanisms
las
of
mesas
application and the different roundtables in the different countries to actually provide that proper follow-up and contribution. So the contributions, the more regularized and formalized we are um, with the domestic work and paid domestic work,
sea
and the
el
more
trabajo
value do we
doméstico y
actually
de cuidado,
provide to that domestic work of attention in society in general. So this will obviously have an enormous impact in the situation of migrant women, which is something that we are actually trying to actually cover in this session. And as I mentioned before, Latin TV actually mentioned the issue of campaigns and information and the different mechanisms that sometimes is not known, and all this connection between and not just from the places of destination, but also from the different places of origin, to know more about what's going to go on in this process as such. And the proposal of digital inclusion that Separa is doing, where she's doing this into different types. One which is universal, uh, to actually have an application due to the fact that the women are actually the ones that are actually losing unemployment in the region. They have been the ones that have been mostly affected. They use this digitalization to use the digital basket as a mechanism of economic inclusion for women, and also of mobility, of labor mobility, of or of a professionalization, um, to work in this line that's being proposed, deprofilization of the different care, and also I think it's very interesting to see the different programs in the participation of my refugee and migration, and how this be included, and how they're actually dealing with this issue. But our proposal is the universalization in the digital inclusion must be obtained, and not just for girls and boys in the educational stage, and which is not just enough, but also it's a incentive for the economic reactivation in the country. So, and also the gender gap, and just because of being migrants, and because they're
adicional por
young,
no
and there's an additional gap because not included digitally. So the future of work and many of our operations, day-to-day operations, must continue with this connection, and the many of the strategies of affirmation, and it has to do with the devices and uses, and to think that um, that we actually foster together.
Gracias, Ana. Pues cerramos así con esta puntual recomendación.
Okay, so we'll wrap up with these recommendations, and specifically for migrant and migrant workers, and it's include these, and from the direction of digital gaps, and from other lines that have actually manifested. I close this panel with aspirations, and with illuminated, and with different specific routes of work that effectively we can actually advance
with all the different stakeholders that are here present from the different sectors. An example of the panel that from Maniamo, we're actually tremendously appreciative and thankful to coordinate this and to have these experiences. Congratulations, and without further ado, I pass the floor to ILO, thanking all the different organizations and the pro temporary presidency of Mexico for this space. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Berenice, por esa
Thank you so
excelente
much, Berenice, for this excellent
presentación en a
uh,
veces tiempos tan
uh,
desafiantes como estos
presentation
de la
and very challenging
tecnología,
times
pero
by
todo se supera
presented by
haciendo
technology,
trabajo
but
en equipo.
everything's
Entonces,
overcome with
muchísimas
this
gracias. Teníamos en la
teamwork.
agenda
So we had an agenda. We had a very last point in the agenda
coordinación
because
con la presidencia
in
portuguesa,
coordination with the pro temporary presidency and with the executive presidency of the RCM and with IOM, we believe that it's very important to actually provide follow-up to these events that are presented a wealth of information of networks of connection between individuals that the chat is filling up with comments. I saw from other countries that actually had weird best practices. We actually want to share this. We still have um, a lot of information to actually share. And also because I believe that's very important to say provide some sort of follow up in a few regional guidelines that actually helps us help all the different stakeholders that are actually here talking about this. So for this, I want to ask my very colleague Gadi if she can actually share a matrix that we're not going to work today. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about this, but it's a proposal that we should have for all of you to actually work afterwards by country and or in first instance, we're actually directed to the RCM. That RC we will continue and with other um, and this is for the formulation of the different actions is with the purpose of actually seeking additional solutions collectively to improve the conditions of domestic workers, of migrant workers, that obviously was today's topic and we actually listened to everyone and to consolidate those ideas that we've actually listened and a view in the future that what can we could do together.
Explicar toda esta matriz en este momento, no es la idea tampoco
And
que
this
lo
is the idea that should be read by everyone because of the time and also because we're many right now we're many people right now to provide a detailed work, so we went through that. But the idea is that we can actually done a previous work in a proposal in that we're actually do with you, and we actually identified three objectives. One is to improve the labor rights, protection of labor rights, and also to actually provide formalization and how to actually recognize the competences of people and to improve the education and training of domestic workers. We've actually listened to seeing many different examples, and I feel that I'm going very fast for the interpretation. Thank you very much. I'll go slower. And we've actually proposed a some general lines for intervention that we see in the second column. We're interested into knowing exactly what section programs that we actually listen to. We listen to a lot of these in the different countries of the RCM to have an idea of what we should have and where we're going. So once again, so this exercise, we're not going to do this today. We are just presenting this, presenting this to you as a proposal. So our proposal is the ILO in coordination with the executive secretary of the RCM and also with the pro temporary presidency of Mexico can actually contact the different countries. We believe that the best way is to do this one by one because each of you have your own reality and your different advances and challenges, and there's a lot of common topics. And together we will support and validate this matrix and filling this, completing this together. So to actually call a labor migration group and to validate all this content. That we can actually do. So it's important that all this that we talked about today, and everything that will come out of this matrix, and that this tool for the formation of this, we consider that it's a very important contribution for the Congress in the context of migration. That I see help ask help Luis Alonso to say when to do this because I don't have this number, but it's something that together we can actually elaborate and to actually have as a contributing factor for this Congress. So I wanted to um, leave it at here and see if there's any recommendations or any question that I repeat afterwards. We will contact each one of you so to actually validate the content of this matrix and to complete this. And this said, I want to thank once again on behalf of ILO the collaboration of the pro temporary presidency of our ILO colleagues to organize this event, and especially all the different panel members from the different countries of the region that are actually are with us. That we actually know that everyone has different agendas, and the time is simply not enough to participate in these type of activities. So we truly thank to giving us a priority and to participate in this, and also the representatives of employers and workers and civil society and different stakeholders that are here with us. And with this, I'll pass the floor to Luis Alonso for the very last part and closing of this event. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nord. Yes, especially just to highlight, this is a matrix of work in the framework on the labor migration group from the RCM. We understand that this event has had a lot of participants, but this is developed in the work group on labor migration and in the work plan from the pro temporary presidency of the RCM that is a response to a strategic plan. And that's why the idea is that we actually provide recommendations guided towards the third Congress on migrant women that according it will be in September of this year, September of this year, and we will send the invitation to all of you. And this Congress is actually coordinated with the protection group from the RCM. So this is a teamwork. This is something that's done collectively, but we wanted to see that the experiences from the different member states, we can actually develop this with everyone in a different session. So we will share this with a different with a labor migration group and the different focal points that have been identified by the member states. So to participate in this work group. So to wrap up, it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Charlene Mendez. She's the director of international affairs from the National Institute of Migration, and she's a coordinator from the work group on labor migration activity that was organized, group that actually organized this activity actually, and that they will wrap up on behalf of the pro temporary presidency of the RCM. So I truly thank the participation of all the different panel members for allowing us to actually share all the experiences and to supporting the implementation of a few projects and to provide technical advice in order to provide recommendations on this very specific topic. It is it is the presence of everyone of our participants that are accompanying us today in this dialogue, providing information to actually benefit our vision, especially our work in the region. It's an honor for the National Institute of Migration of Mexico to actually coordinate together with the Technical Secretariat of Well-being, the Labor Migration in the Pro Temporary Presidency in Mexico of the RCM. That is a space for dialogue in migration topics and regional topics, and to incentivize the exchange of information and experiences to respond in the best way the cooperation. As presented before and very broadly has been presented in this dialogue, the pandemic has been affected women tremendously. It increased the unemployment, especially migrant women and domestic workers. The majority actually actually work twice as much in two works, and outside of this, women in the extensive care of households and their daily activities in conditions of high vulnerability and risk in the context of this pandemic. So this situation has been aggravated by the exclusion and marginalization and the process that we actually know in uh, in the context of poverty of many of these women and indigenous women and disabled women, underage women, women with low levels of schooling, And this last thing precisely is the one that actually calls us here: how to strengthen our task to ensure the labor rights of women, of migrant women in paid domestic work. So it's precisely because this we actually put the realization of this social dialogue that I actually want to comment, which is the first activity from this space, precisely to actually deepen on the regional mechanisms that can foster to actually improve the conditions, labor conditions of the domestic workers, and those actually actually conjugate or actually promote this paid domestic work based on the experiences between the countries and mechanisms from the region in recognizing the competences and the training with different domestic workers is also the regularization of migration and the formalization of the different domestic workers, and to generate recommendations and matters for the member states, and to serve as a contribution, like mentioned over here, for a third Congress on Women in the context of migration of the RCM that we were carried out in the month of September. Considering that we also develop spaces for exchange of experiences on behalf of the government and the workers and the civil society that have actually promoted advances in regularizing migration and labor migration incorporation into systems of social security, compliance of conditions of work and certifications, and development of competences competence and qualification for work. This actually demands that all the authorities, the competent authorities, actually work collectively and effectively. The cooperation as affected the countries, but also it should transcend the borders and to include the institutions in the different countries, neighboring countries. And we've seen today during this social dialogue session also requires the participation of all the different stakeholders, engagement of all different stakeholders and everyone from our society. Thank you so much for your attention, and especially I truly want to thank especially the participation from all of you in this social dialogue. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shadeni. And if you are okay, if you could open up your cameras so we can take a group picture from all other participants. And while we open up the cameras, I also want to give the final thanks, of course, to the Pro Temporary Presidency, the coordination of the Labor Migration Group, and of course to the INM and the Secretariat of Social Division. I also want to thank to ILO and our interpreter Ron that was here today. Thank you much for your patience. For those of who speak very quickly, and also Marisol behind the cameras, and all the team from ILO, Juan, Jorgina, and Mariana, and all the team from ILO. Thank you so much for your collaboration, and of course, from IOM for accompanying us today in this event. So we hope to see you soon. There's another call invitation for May 27th or 26th, which is the second part of the conversation on best practices of labor contracts. So the invitation has already been sent out, and thanks to all the different corresponding agencies. So we invite you to accompany us. So we have several pictures of everyone. So thank you so much for being with us today. Um, we hope to see you soon. Thank you, Berenice, for the excellent moderation, and Sepal, and also as observer from the RCM, and everyone who is with us. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, thank you very much.